Hello, assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And I need to just get this all off my chest. So let's just have a podcast evening today, more like a midnight session here. It's exactly 12:04 a.m. Yep, exactly midnight, 4 minutes past. Now, two things, and I hope I do actually get to properly talk about two of these things. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about, and I've been putting it off, is because I did it actually a podcast on source of depression, but I feel as if maybe I don't know, let me just talk about it all over again, because this is a conversation that I was having with a friend who's also a doctor, and he happens to be related to somebody who's very close to him who is going through depression, and her depression goes so deep that she just stops talking. Now, a veteran here in the depression department, since I have been fighting depression for 23 years now, let me just say that I immediately understood what stage she was in, because I have been at that stage. I spent years not talking to my family or anybody else. And even now, I avoid talking to people, even though, people may think that I'm completely fine and all. See, that's another thing. It doesn't mean that if you're in depression, you're always going to show people that you're in depression. But yes, there is a time of your depression that is probably in my case, I would call it the second stage, or the second and third stages of depression. And that is when you really do not give a flying frack about anybody around you, and about hiding the fact that you're depressed or pissed off or resentful and begrudging, and you just want everybody to get the frack out of your life, and you do not mind showing that through your posture, through your face, through your whole body language. So yeah, since I've been through that, and it takes years, by the way, to go out of that. That's why I said that it's not necessarily just stage 2, but it can actually be stage 2 and 3 combined. So 2 stages, in a row where you go through that. And I feel that she is at that stage where she just does not want to listen to anybody's BS, and she does not want to turn her mind around just to please other people, again, which is totally BS. Because listen, when you're depressed, truly depressed, you are already very, very aware of your mind state, both conscious and unconscious. In fact, I would say that for a person like me, who has always been extremely aware of my unconscious mind, and a person who has always been in full control of both my mind, my thoughts, my emotions, since I was a kid, for people like us, it's actually, one would think it's difficult for us to go into depression. Yes, it is difficult. It takes a lot longer for us to go into depression compared to the regular people. But when we do go into depression, then we get deeper into that state compared to, again, normal people, because we are too aware of exactly what is going on. We are also aware of our source of depression. That's another thing. Do not think that people who are depressed do not know why they're depressed. Although, yes, there are a lot of cases in clinical depression where people, it seems, apparently, and I'm saying both these words, with quotation marks, that they are not aware of their source of depression. But I beg to differ here. At least in the case of people like me, we are deeply aware of our source of depression, and we also know how to get rid of it, because the reason we get into depression is because we are unable to get rid of the source of our depression. So, for example, if your family is the source of your depression, but your family is sticking to you like a toxic parasite and not letting you go, you cannot get out of your depression. If they want to follow you everywhere you go, you travel, they want to travel with you, you stay at home, they want to come and be with you, they will just not leave you alone. and they are the source of your depression. They are the reasons why you ended up in this in the first place, and then they just will not leave you alone, and then you are trapped and you become paralyzed, both mentally, socially, as well as physically. And then in most cases, especially in a culture like ours, in countries like ours, they trap you financially. They take away your financial freedom while pretending all the time that you're financially okay and you're independent. But they take your independence away from you. They control your independence. They control your level. They control your financial independence. They control your movements. They control your social life. They control even your career and your job. And so that is actually the very definition of toxic parenting or toxic families. And our culture is toxic because it always begins at home. And the fact that our culture has become so toxic, our society has become so toxic that they don't even realize that this is why they're toxic. This is again something I'm sure I've talked about a million times before, but let's just go ahead with it. So, this is what makes our country implode. And it will implode a million times over and over again because people are not ready to change. So, the hypocrisy, the deeply rooted hypocrisy that gives birth to never ending grudges and resentment, gives birth to again never ending depression. And this depression is never ending because you cannot get away. And as we know, the whole idea behind curing depression is getting away. But you're not getting away when wherever you go, the people who are causing you depression are following you everywhere. Getting away means getting away from the source of your depression. So, for example, it doesn't matter where in the country I move, as long as I'm within the country, this country is a prison for me. I will always be trapped and I will always be in depression. I actually left the country twice, and the same people who caused my depression followed me everywhere I went. I could not treat my depression. And so it got worse and worse and worse because then they dragged me back into this hellhole where they trapped me completely. So that is basically how depression develops and how it goes on to manic. Yes, this is your next stage where it leads you to manic depression, where you get so pissed off, where you're so tired of their everyday bullshit that they keep throwing at you, because day in and day out you're constantly trying to compromise and sacrifice and endure, and then you find out that decades have passed and you're still not out of that bullshit. So when toxicity is persistent, your depression, its level gets higher and higher and higher until you reach a point of no return. And at that point, even going out or getting away is not going to cure it. So a person like me who's so well aware of my brain and how it works, I can actually literally see every single stage and analyze every single stage of my depression. And I hope it can be helpful for those who are not able to fully analyze what's going on. So in that case, in that discussion, I was trying to explain to him that, the person is in their second or third stage of depression. So you cannot just easily say, you should go out, socialize, look at the trees and the animals, look at the greenery, it helps. No, it doesn't. No, it really doesn't. Because when you're at the second or third stage of depression, you are past the greenery, you're past the nature, you're past the trees, you're past the animals, you're past socializing. In fact, if anything, you're lucky if they do nothing for you. Because if anything, they can just make your state of mind worse. They can put you into a deeper state of depression. Meeting people, talking to people, listening to their bullshit, where they act as if they know everything, but they know jack shit. And then listening to the people who have added to or contributed towards your depression, and they think that they are helping you by making you rant about whatever it is that's disturbing you, and they think that they have helped you so much because you've gotten it off your chest. No, that's not how it works. This is a very, very misused cliche where they say, oh, just vomit everything out to get it out of your system. No, it doesn't work like that, not for everyone. There are many people for whom actually talking about whatever it is that disturbs them makes it worse. So all you have done is made things worse for them by triggering their depression, triggering their trauma, triggering the source of their depression, and you have now put them into a deeper state of depression, actually. As I've said it in my previous podcasts, whenever I've talked about depression, when you really want to help people, if you really want to help people, first of all, stop making them feel that you're using them. You think that you're being very generous and you think you're being very psychologically acute and you think that you're being very smart when you tell them, oh, you know what, well, why don't you do volunteer job? Why don't you don't realize that actually one of the main reasons of depression nowadays is people feeling used and abused and cheated. So when you're telling them they should get busy again and volunteer, you are actually insulting them all over again. You understand? You're insulting them all over again. You're pushing them into that depression all over again because they're thinking, when will this end? When will people stop using me? When will people just stop with this bullshit of thinking that I am born to serve people? These are things you should talk about with selfish people who don't do that. And that's why they live very happy-go-lucky lives, because they're so selfish. They were never there for their parents, but they're controlling their kids. Now notice that. It's very ironic, but there you can actually judge the kind of people those parents are, that if they are so busy controlling their children, it means that they were so selfish that they were never even there for their own parents. Those are the people who become the most domineering, interfering parents. Those who were never there for their parents and who enjoyed their lives doing whatever shit they wanted to, they are the ones who end up controlling their own children, dominating their lives. So you get then a fair just. So those are the people you need to go and talk to and say that, why don't you spend your life doing something for others? Or why don't you let go? Those are the people that you need to confront when you're talking about letting go. The people who are in depression are not in depression because they can't let go. It's because nobody is letting them go. And this is a key difference that you need to understand. People do not fall into depression because they can't let go. They are falling into depression because people are not letting them go. Things are not letting them go. Society is not letting them go. Families are not letting them go. So when doctors say that you need a change of scenery, they don't just mean a change of scenery. They mean a full-blown change. It means get away from all those faces that you look at every day and get away from the place that you are at. Go to someplace completely new, someplace completely different, away from all the people and all the things and places that you know and are familiar with. And that is the true therapy. Not going out and sitting on a bench and looking at trees and gardens and animals and people. No, that is stage one. That is when you're actually falling into depression. At that point, it helps. But when you are already way deep into depression, it doesn't help. If anything, it can just make your depression worse, because when you look at all of the greenery and the animals and the people and the freedom and the openness, it makes you realize all the more that you're trapped. So it makes things worse. So yeah, if you really care about the person next to you who is in depression, you need to get away from them, and you need to get them away from you, and you need to get them out. And you need to let them do what they want to do instead of telling them what they should do. Okay? And this is where the next point comes at. As I said, the hypocrisy, the toxicity, the level of toxicity in our society, the fact that people think that they can say and do anything they want to without accountability. And the fact that they're all screaming blue murder about how our country has been fucked to pieces, but they don't realize that they are themselves 100% responsible for it. Because only a dignified nation can lead the country towards prosperity and success. But a nation that has no dignity, and yes, our nation does not have dignity. Anybody who wants to fight me with that, nobody would dare do that in the first place. But if there is some stupid jackass out there who wants to show their ignorance by fighting me on that, please come on. Because I can tell you 100%, ours is not a dignified nation, which is why all the things have happened so easily, which is why we keep getting America's interference, we keep getting traitors planted in our governments, we keep getting the army interfering with our freedom. Because again, you see, this toxicity begins at home. Interference of your personal freedom begins at home. So obviously, your government, your army, they are a reflection of your culture. This is your culture. And this is why you have lived with it for so long. And this is why you have no dignity, because you yourselves are part of that toxic culture. You yourselves are part of all that hypocrisy. And that is why you cannot say or do anything against your government, because at the end of the day, you know it, that you're no different, right? Because as I said, hypocrisy and toxicity begins at home. Interference, censorship, control begins at home. Your parents are doing it. Then you, when you become parents, you're doing it to your kids. And each generation of parent thinks that, oh, we are giving our children more freedom than our parents gave us. But actually, it's the opposite. Because as I've talked about this even before, if you actually look way, 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 way back in history, if you look at the ancient civilizations, even if you look at your great, great, great grandfathers and mothers, you will notice that when their children reached puberty, they stopped interfering. They started treating them as adults and they started giving them respect as adults, whereas the next generation refused to do so, and the next generation even more so, and the next generation once again even more so. So now each new generation of parenting has proved to be more toxic, more intolerant, more controlling than the previous generation. Ironic, isn't it? But that's exactly what's happening. We all seem to think that we're giving our children more freedom. No, we're not. We are actually finding new ways to control our children and more toxic ways. And this is why in today's society, despite the superficial freedom, we have no freedom. And because we are actually aware of the fact that we really do not have freedom, even at home, this is why this lack of freedom on a governmental level has not affected us so much that we should go to the streets and kill them, right? Because if we really were a dignified nation that worked on morals and values, and if we actually had dignity, if we had honesty, if we did not have hypocrisy, if we did not have toxicity at home, then we would have a problem with it outside, right? So there are people who cannot bear it. Obviously, in my generation, most of my generation could not bear it. That is why my generation is actually very active. The generation before us, the boomers, well, as I've said it time and again, they have been on the record the worst generation in the history of the whole globe. Seriously, from America all the way to Africa, to Europe, to Australia, boomers were the worst generation ever to have been produced. The most toxic generation, whose level of toxicity has far exceeded the next two generations. So the generation that's not even born yet is going to have that toxicity thrown at them before they're even born. The level of corruption, the level of toxicity, the level of selfishness, the level of, short-cutting everything, that has far, far, far reached the next two generations. The repercussions I'm talking about the repercussions of their corruption, their dishonesty, their shortcuts, This is now going to be paid for by the next two generations. Our generation we are already paying for it, but the next two generations are going to get it even worse. And we can do jack shit for them. We can do jack shit for ourselves, because no amount of protests and no amount of riots is going to stop that corrupt generation until they die. And they're not dying. That's the worst part about the good boomers, is that they're just not dying. They're not. It doesn't matter if you're living in America, the boomers are all over you. Your government, your agencies, your intelligence agencies, everything that's ruling you. Everywhere you've seen these old farts that just are not dying, and their toxic level is so great that it's just covering the whole earth. And same as with Pakistan, we're just not getting rid of the old farts. They're freaking everywhere. And they're not even talented. I mean, one would actually not mind having these dinosaurs here if they were talented, but they are not even talented, because that generation was never about merit. They were never about talent. They were all about connections, using and abusing connections. They were all about nepotism. They were all about parachuting. They were all about bribery. They were all about shortcuts again. So that is why this is the worst, most corrupt generation that has literally screwed the next two generations. And this is where the whole problem comes in. Why depression is rampant. It doesn't matter your level of depression. It doesn't matter your source of depression. It doesn't matter, because it cannot be cured. It cannot be cured because it is now a global problem. It's not an individual problem. It's not a rare case. It is a global problem, and it's a global problem because not only does it begin at home, but there was a time when people could fool themselves by thinking, oh, we're growing up, we'll leave our house, we'll be able to make our own environment, our own home. But then you fall back into that cesspit. But many have managed to get out of that cesspit. But now it's on a global level, because now your governments are pouring all that toxicity onto you that you thought you had left when you left home. And this is why depression now, no matter what the reason behind it, no matter what the source, it is now constantly accumulated. It is constantly accumulated on by your society, by your government, by the wars that your governments are forcing onto you, by the economic crisis that they're forcing onto you, by the social crisis, the moral crisis. And it doesn't matter how much we say we don't care and that it doesn't affect us. It is affecting us. It's affecting our souls. It's affecting our brains, because at the end, no matter how much you like to live life like a stupid fool and close your eyes and act dumb, essentially we are not stupid fools. And once your eyes are opened, you cannot close them. You cannot unsee or unhear or unlearn what you have just learned and heard and seen all for yourself. You can unlearn and unsee and unhear the hearsay that you have been learning, the stories that people have been brainwashing you with. But you cannot unlearn, you cannot unsee, you cannot unhear what your eyes, your body, your mind have suddenly opened up to on their own. And then that adds further to your depression now, because you know that you're helpless. That is again, one of the core keys of depression is helplessness. Again, the feeling of being trapped. So your society has trapped you. I mean, you're already trapped because of the source of your depression, but now your society has trapped you, your government has trapped you, the whole world is trapped. Everybody is in that helpless state. Everybody is in that state of mental paralysis, because you know what's going on. You know you want to stop it. You know how to stop it, but you cannot stop it. You rediscover your helplessness. And then it takes you back to how it all began, from home. Because if you had a different environment at home, maybe you would not feel so helpless at your 40s or 50s or 60s. But the fact that even when you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s and you feel trapped, you feel you can't breathe, you feel suffocated, it's because you thought that you could leave all that shit and make your own life, your own environment, only to be once again impeded upon by your government. Because now there's no way out, you are 100% trapped. That helplessness now will remanifest. And this time, again, as I said, because you are aware of your helplessness, you're aware of how you cannot get away from it. That will put you deeper into depression. And this is why, you talk about depression after the war or before the war. It's not just the superficial depression or the financial depression, but it ultimately becomes your psychological depression, your physical depression, social, moral, everything. And this is why our generation will continue to suffer from depression of various levels. And the next generation will be even worse because they will be psychotic. The next generation right now is not just in a manic depressive state, but they are in a psychotic manic depressive state. 2 levels ahead of us, or should I say 2 levels worse than us. So, when in Pakistan or in any other country, when people, India, Bangladesh, when people think that, oh, it's the norm, we're taking it easy. It's not the norm, you're not taking it easy. Not only are you going against your moral values that your religion has imposed upon you, but you are making life difficult for people around you. You are creating unnecessary tension and stress, which is, by the way, one of the unforgivable sins in Islam. What you people don't seem to understand about hukukul ibad, which in Islam we keep on and on talking about how your behavior towards mankind is more important than your relationship with God and your behavior towards God. So your attitude towards other people is more important for God than whatever it is that's going on between you and God. So the rights of other people that you have to fulfill and your duties and responsibilities are more important. And that is what are going to be taken into account. That is what God has no right to forgive you for, because you're doing it to the other person. So only that person can forgive you. And if that person chooses not to forgive you, even God cannot forgive you. And you cannot force another person to forgive you. It doesn't matter if that person even says he forgives you, but if his heart still holds resentment and grudge, you're not forgiven. And you have no right to begrudge that person for not forgiving you. If anything, that shows, again, your immoral attitude, your shameless attitude, your toxic attitude, where you think that you're above that person, that you should be able to say and do anything you like, but that person must forgive you. Are you God that that person must forgive you? On a personal note, I can't even forgive God for many of the things. Why the fuck should I forgive you? I just explain that to me, I mean, one would think that we cannot even compete with God, but here I am telling you that there are so many things that I cannot even forgive God for. So why the mother fudge should I forgive you? Just explain that to me, will you? You need to get off your high horses. You people need to understand that whenever you are showing inconsideration towards another person, that is an unforgivable sin. Whether you are deliberately being inconsiderate, or even if you're unconsciously being inconsiderate, but you're not even trying to realize that you're being inconsiderate, despite seeing the reaction of the other person. So yes, you will have to pay for it. It's an unforgivable sin. I've seen so many people who think that it's fun to act as if they're deaf and they have selective deafness and selective hearing. and they keep on making you repeat your words, and then make you scream your words out loud, and then they tell other people, look, this person, look at how he's screaming at me. So yeah, that, I'm sorry, but your inconsideration towards other people, where you refuse to take care of the problem that you have of a selective hearing, and you're forcing other people to inconvenience themselves to such a state where they're forced to talk loud and scream and repeatedly scream their words, so that you should stop saying, what say, what say, what say, like an idiot moron that you are. Yeah, the sin is on you, not that person that's ended up screaming the words at you, but the sin is 100% on you, because you have put that person in a state of stress. So that any act of inconsideration towards another person is an act of sin towards the other person that cannot be forgiven. Even the smallest act of inconsideration, where you refuse to take care of yourself, even though you know what you're supposed to do to take care of yourself and your stuff, and then you put your burden on somebody else, that is an act of inconsideration, and you have to pay for it. It's not forgivable. Sorry. So this, our people have committed all such acts in their lives. In our society, all these acts are part of our culture, it seems, where people have to have selective hearing. People will always renege on their words. For example, I had this very, very long conversation that lasted for days on a potential tenant, in which I kept on and on telling them that this is how it goes, this is how much it costs, this is what you're going to get, this is what we're doing, this is what you need to do. And that person time and again said, oh, this, I have this, I don't need this, I have this, I don't need this, don't you worry, I have everything, you don't have to worry, I can deal with it, you don't have to worry, I can afford it. And then that person, when you again tell that person that no, I am not ready to give this thing to you, you have to come check it out yourself, and then go back, finalize it with me properly, and then we'll let you stay. And what do? You come, you make that person pick you up to show you the place. Okay, fine. For humanity's sake, one would forget all that. And then when that person makes it very clear that, listen, you're just here to check out the place, but after that, please go back, take your time, finalize everything with us, and then come back. And then you sit down and say, oh no, I've decided I'm staying. And then you spend one whole week taking, acting as a guest, although you're supposed to be a tenant, but you're acting as a guest, and you're reaping off the hospitality of your landlord, for free, basically. And then you start changing your words and reneging on oh no, actually I can't afford this, can you make it this much? Oh no, actually I did not, and I'm thinking maybe you can do this. And we're like, no, stick to the agreement. So that's another thing in Pakistan that's very, very common, that people do not stick to their agreements, and they think nothing of it. But in Islam, this is the biggest act of a grievance or sin that you can ever commit. In Islam, the Prophet has said that people who renege on their words can no longer consider themselves to be Muslims. And in Pakistan, you claim to be Muslims, but 99.9% Pakistanis renege on their words, either as parents or as landlords or as tenants or as friends or as government, as the army, as the intelligence, as teachers, as students, as siblings, as business partners, as employees and employers, as just normal people. Every single act, every single word that you get out of your mouth, you renege on it. This is a fashion. This is the trend. This is a culture in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, maybe other countries too. I cannot talk about them. I can only talk about countries I know about. That in our culture, now this is what you call culture, and you're so proud of your culture that you have actually gone against the very foundation This is the foundation of Islam, where it is literally said that you can no longer consider yourself a Muslim when you renege on your words, when you tell half truths, when you lie, when you spread rumors, when you slander, when you defame. And these are all the things that are rampantly done as part of our culture. You know, when you have electricians who come, they take money from you, they don't fix this job they don't do their job properly, and then they don't come back. And then when they decide to come back after 3 4 months, and then they say, oh no, you have to pay us all over again for the mess that they made. This is again an unforgivable sin. These are all things that add up to your unforgivable sins. These are sins that cannot be forgiven. Don't you even dare think that God will forgive you because you're Muslims. Because in God's eyes, in His book, you are no longer Muslims. A man who does not fulfill his promise is no longer a Muslim. Tell me, which Pakistani have you seen who has actually fulfilled his promise? I cannot even vouch for my own parents. And I am a very, very, very black and white kind of a person when it comes to justice. I believe that either you stop teaching us these things if you're not going to practice them, or you damn well practice them. You cannot be hypocrites. Again, because you see, hypocrites are also no longer Muslims. In Islam, it is very clearly defined that there are three categories of people. You have Muslims who are actually genuinely practicing to be good people, who follow the rules, who do not break their promises, who are not hypocrites, who do not lie, who do not control other people, who do not impose their decisions and beliefs on other people, who do not impede on other people's success, or put obstacles on other people's life goals. You know, every little thing that makes you a good person, a principled person, that makes you a Muslim. The second category is a hypocrite. In Islam, hypocrites are not Muslims. They are a category all on their own. These are those people who call themselves Muslims, but they have nothing to do with Islam in practice. And then you have the third category, who are the munshrik. These are those people who perform different acts of shirk in various forms, whether it is grave worshipping or ancestor worshipping, or thinking about or believing in saints and scholars, and following a certain scholar and saying, oh, I belong to this group, and following a certain scholar and saying, oh, I belong to that group. Because in Islam there is no place for priests and monks. We are all our own priests and monks. So when you blindly follow any religious scholar and his beliefs and his teachings, you have committed shirk. And this is also very clearly defined by the Prophet himself. So these are the three categories of people. Tell me, have you found even 1% in Pakistan that belongs to the first category of a mu'min, of a Muslim, of a person who follows principles, does good deeds, takes care of others, does not hurt others, does not impose himself, does not dominate others, does not control others, does not lie to others, and actually keeps his promises and is punctual on time? Because again, these are all the definitions of a Muslim. In Pakistan, you are not a Muslim. I'm sorry, none of you can call yourselves Muslims when your very basic lifestyle contradicts the foundations of Islam. You are never punctual. You renege on your words. You always think that it doesn't matter, we can always, change our words. We can always say yes, and then we can, find somebody else to do our job. And you've become notorious for that now. Now people literally know that you're a Pakistani. If you get paid for a job that you then delegate to somebody else, and then at the end you fail to take responsibility for that job when it's not done properly. And then what do you say to them? You say, oh, this is Pakistan. You should know that these things happen. You should already have made your own arrangements. So they should pay you haram, and then they should go and make their own arrangements. Because they should know that this is Pakistan and you are Pakistanis and this is what goes on in Pakistan. Amazing. Amazing. 99.9% of Pakistanis have ultimately committed haram khori at one point or throughout their lives by reneging on your words, by not keeping your promises, by changing or trying to change agreements after they've been verbally already concluded upon. Saying one thing, doing another. Now, this is actually called U turn. People talk about Imran Khan's U turns. Those are not U turns, actually. Knowing when to change something that is going wrong in order to set it right, that is not a U turn. What our regular people do on a daily basis, or what our present government and the army are doing, this is U turn. U turn is reneging on your words, saying something else, and then later on expecting that everybody should accept the fact that you can always change. I'm sorry, but I cannot. I am the kind of person who, if I have made an agreement with somebody, I stick to that agreement, even to my own detriment. I would never dare to go to that person and say, I know we agreed to this, but I cannot now go according to these conditions. So, can you please just change everything and inconvenience yourself for me so that I should be convenienced? No, I have never done that in my entire life, and I have suffered for it a lot. But I can very safely say I have never inconvenienced anybody. But I can also very safely say that a lot of people have inconvenienced me, and it has always been to my detriment. So I do not understand, tolerate, endure, or accept such practices. These are the things also that add to your stress levels, they add to your tensions. These are toxic things. These are actually, again, part of your toxicity. These are those toxins that enter your mind and fester through and make you sick. So in Pakistan, most people who are suffering from depression are actually suffering from the consequences of their own acts. And why? Because they cannot let go and they cannot let be. So they're so busy inconveniencing others, and then those people inconvenience them back. And so that's a vicious cycle of, people causing stress to each other and people putting each other in a depressive mode. And this is a never ending cycle because our people will never change. So, I hope we have covered these two main points to satisfaction. First of all, you're a prick. You're a prick if you think that it's okay for you to say one thing at one point and then turn around and say, oh, I know we've talked about this, but you see, my situation has become like this. So I'm thinking, oh, why can't you accommodate me in this way? Yeah, and you're a prick when you delay and add more delays. And you're an even bigger prick when you create a situation. You actually create, initiate, and on your own practically create a situation that would not have existed if it wasn't for your act. And then you go running to somebody else and say, oh, because we're family, so you take charge and you take responsibility. Yeah. This is the extreme level of selfishness and stupidity. And again, this is something that is very rampant in our society. It's very rampant. And you can see it, again, by the acts of our government and our army. They created the situation. Now they're trying to throw it on us, and they're trying to throw it on Imran Khan, and they're trying to say, oh, you know what? So what that we created the situation, but now you need to take responsibility. Why? Why should we take responsibility? Did we place a tender with you? Did you accept that tender? Are you paying us? Why? So the fact that in our culture, burdens are placed on other people, liabilities and responsibilities are placed on other people, and in a way where you're making them feel as if you are doing such a you're committing such a big, generous act, you're doing them a huge favor by making them to carry your burdens. Parents do that, siblings do that, relatives do that. And it doesn't matter how near or far a relative you are. Even if you're a cousin twice removed, you think you have the right to do that. friends do that, our government is doing it, the army is doing it, everybody's doing it. I mean, this is the toxic culture again. As I said, it begins from home. And the fact that people are still not accepting the fact or acknowledging the fact that this is the core issue, this is the core problem with them. This is why Pakistan does not have a future. It cannot have a future. It cannot change. You cannot change a country when the people of that country refuse to recognize what's wrong and they refuse to change. So, hope everybody's got whatever it is that they need to get from it. This is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.